All right, you guys. So we're going to pick up where we left off from last week. We are still exploring several things in Adobe After Effects in this module. We're exploring shape layers. Very specifically, we're exploring shape layers. So we're actually exploring, how to create our own visual elements in Adobe After Effects and learning about all of the things that we can do to these elements. It's so different from the first types of visual elements we worked with in this program. So we've been able to experiment with different types of effects that we can add to shapes. And in this particular example, we also experimented with adding expressions, which are pieces of JavaScript language that allow us to add some extra effects to our visual elements. So like in this case, we added a wiggle expression to this musical note, or this treble clef. And as you can see, I need to do the same thing with this musical note that's getting ready to land right now. So I'm going to walk you through the steps again from the ground up on how to create a shape. And I'm going to start with another treble clef because I think we need a review on that. Shapes can be tricky like these when they have negative space inside of the shapes. And so understanding how to build I would call this a compound path in Illustrator. It's the same kind of concept. But you're actually creating a mask effect that allows that negative space to become open and see-through. So I'm going to go over that as well. So I'm trying to find another one that I want to animate. Maybe one on another page, just to give some variety. I don't really see any that I can trace on top of. The idea is we want parts of the notes from these photos or this video to just come to life. So I'm going to create another treble clef, okay? And then we'll get to the animation process. So in this part of the demonstration, I'm going to walk you through how to create a shape that's a complex shape that has a hole punched in it, all right? Because if you've noticed, we don't really, we have an eraser tool, but it doesn't erase any part of your shape. It doesn't really work that way. So I'm going to show you how to create what I would call a compound path in After Effects. And it's with the use of masks that let this happen. So to get started, I'm going to make sure that all of my layers are deselected and even locked because we don't want to mess up anything that we've already done. And I'm going to find a place in the video where I have a good access, good view of a visual element that I would like to trace. So I'm going to get my magnifying lens and I'm going to zoom in on one of these shapes. I'm trying to decide which one I want to zoom in on. And there's a little half note there that would be fun to do, but it's so tiny and out of the way. I'm going to get my pen tool, and I think maybe I'll just, what are these little symbols called? I forget. It's not bass, because this is a treble clef, so you wouldn't see that on here.
That's flat.
Flat, okay. Thank you. It's been over 35 years since I was in band. Believe it or not, there was a time when I knew those things. So this is the start of my little shape here. It looks kind of unimpressive at the moment. If it helps you better to be able to see what you're drawing, one thing you can do is just turn the fill off, and that way you can just look at your path. Now, once you deselect it, you won't see the path, but once you select that shape layer again, that path will become visible once again. So I need to edit this path a little bit better to follow the contour edges of this shape. So I'm going to open the contents, go down to the shape, go to the path, select the path, And I'm selecting it right here where it says path, not the path layer with the stopwatch. Not that one. That's for animating. I'm selecting the path in such a way that I can interact with these vertices and be able to grab them and move them and reshape the lines of the path. So I'm going to do that using the selection tool and just start moving some of these anchor points in closer and maybe even moving these directional handles a little bit. Don't forget that you can always convert a vertices if you need to, which I do in this case right here. So I use the Convert Vertex tool to do that. And it looks like I could use another anchor point right here to make this little ridge that bumps up. So I'm going to do that using the Add Vertex tool and just add that to the path. And I'm going to see if these directional handles will let me extend that. All right, so I have this shape, and it has an interior shape to it as well that needs to be cut out. And so here's how you create a compound shape like this. That's what I'll call these whenever you have to cut into a space and create like a window or negative space. So I make sure that I have this layer selected that I want to add, that shape to. And then before I begin to draw with the pen tool, so I'm going to go get the pen tool right now. Before I begin to draw on this shape, I need to make sure that I have the settings right. So right now I'm in Tool Creates Shape. But really what I want is for the tool to create a mask. And that's what this button does. So make sure that you have that set right here. And then with the pen tool, come over here and create your masked shape. Now, you won't appreciate it as a mask just yet because we need to turn the fill back on. Now, it looks like there's maybe another little shape right here that needs to be created. And so that looks pretty good. And your mask colors the colors of your mask will be different from each other, so don't be alarmed by that. That is the way they look. All right, so I have my shapes created. Sorry for all the silence while I'm sitting here working on this. So now we're going to turn these masks into holes. that create little windows for this shape in the background. So I'm going to select my shape. So this is my shape right here. I'm going to add a color to it. So I'm going to add a solid and click OK. Uh-oh. No, it's not.
I don't mean, I'm not talking about your artistry, but I mean
it's just not a great.
Yeah. Say it's not original shape of that particular figure. I don't know what extra little hump is coming from.
Yeah,
Shouldn't have that hump.
It shouldn't. Well, let's get rid of it. That looked.
Right under that. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Like a beat.
Yeah, I should have done that one. Well, I'm going to remove that. Yeah, because you can see it in the, that's why I thought, well, maybe that's a part of it, but it could just be a stain on the paper. But yeah, you're right. I'm going to clean that up. All right, so right now these masks are set to add. I want it to subtract. So I'm going to go to each mask and set it from add to subtract. And then we have shapes with little cutouts. That makes sense, everybody? Not quite. You're fine. What's that? Okay, so you got to switch it. You got it on those masks. Open them up. Open the masks up. And set these to subtract. Did you add any color to your shape? It's supposed to be these, but I don't know. Let's see. Your option up here for your color fill. Yeah, and so I was looking at it up here. That's my go-to. It's always sit up here and I hit fill, and then I have to make sure that it's actually. It was like that on my first, like the other. It's up here at the top. Yeah. I don't know, but you probably could just set the, if you go to standard, maybe it'll set it up. So now go back and reset that to solid fill right here. We just, no, right. And I don't know why it's not at the top, but. All right, you guys. So how did everybody do creating their compound shape? Everybody do okay with that? That's fine. Just work on a note then. All right, so now we're ready to animate these. And I actually have a musical note that is already animated, but needs to wiggle. So let me zoom out and show you what I'm talking about here. So as I scrub through, I have this little guy right here waiting to lift off. And it does take off, but there's no wiggle. So this is a great opportunity for me to walk you through those steps again on how to apply the wiggle and then how to control the wiggle. So right now, and one thing I'd like to do with this is maybe control how it sits, in the space. Because the page kind of moves a little bit in the background, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle that. But I'll probably just overlook that for right now and just get onto the wiggle. So I'm going to apply a wiggle to the rotation, not the position, but the rotation. So this musical note right here, right now, its position, scale, and rotation has been animated. So you can see that in the timeline. So it's at this point where the musical note begins to take off. That's when the wiggle needs to begin. But first we need to apply the wiggle. And we're not applying it to the path because we don't want the whole path, to shake as, for the motion path. We want just the object that has the rotation. We want the rotation aspect of it to have the wiggle.
What is this first little dot right here? At the beginning of the time.
Right here?
Yeah.
That is a keyframe indicator. So, if you notice, these property layers, they're all built to expand and collapse. But it's still important to be able to see where those markers are. So, you don't see it as a keyframe right now because this layer is collapsed. But if I open it, then you'll see these are the keyframes that are inside. So it's showing you the placement of where a keyframe would be in that layer without having to have it all expanded. But those are important things to know because we depend on being able to see where other keyframes are on the timeline to know where we need to line up our other events that are happening on other layers. And so that's why they show up as little dots instead of full-on frames. All right, so back to this shape. I'm going to apply a motion. I have motion tweens in my head because that's all I talked about last class. I'm going to apply a wiggle expression to the rotation. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking on rotation and choose edit expression. And there's the first part of our JavaScript right there. And it's waiting for us to give it some instructions. Didn't mean to do that. But I'm going to double-click on that and type in wiggle, and then you'll see some JavaScript hints will pop up. I'm just going to choose this one. And then we're going to give it some values. So I'm going to give it an amount of 5 and no spaces, but put a comma. And then for the magnitude, I'm going to put in 150. And then just make sure you click somewhere out of that. Don't hit return because you'll kick part of that JavaScript language down on the next line. And your code won't be as pretty. So now I'm going to hit the play button. Oops, not play, but the space button. And now it's got a crazy wiggle. So, but notice at the beginning, that note is just wiggling out of control. We don't want it to wiggle like that at the beginning. We want it to stay put. All right? So here's the next step. All right? So here's where we get into how do we control that wiggle? We're going to add a null layer to this. All right? So I'm just going to collapse this for a second. And I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to go to Layer, New, and then choose Layer Null. So New, or just Null, Null Object. All right, so there's our Null Object. And I'm going to put this closer to this layer that I'm working on down here. So my layer that's, my shape layer that is unlocked, that's the one that I'm working on. That's the one with the crazy wiggle. All right. So right now, a null object can be anything. And you'll find out even more about null objects in the next module because we'll be using them again. But just think of these as like blank envelopes that have lots of possibilities because you can assign a lot of different commands to them and properties to them that can control other shapes and other elements in your composition. So I need to apply, since I need this null to act a very specific way, I need to add an expression slider to this. So with this null layer selected, I'm going to go to, I think it's layer, let's check layer first. Because it always takes me a minute to find this. Let's try effect. And we're going to go to expression controls, and we're going to choose slider control. So now we have a slider control, and let me expand this a little bit. So right now, it's set to 0, and it's not going to be doing anything right now anyway. But we want to find the place where the musical note takes off. That is the point at which the wiggle needs to start. Not before then, but right about here. So I'm going to set a keyframe for the slider, and it's going to be set to 0. We're going to leave it at 0. So hit the keyframe, or hit the stopwatch and give ourselves a keyframe. Then immediately after that, just a frame or two after, we're going to reset the value for that slider. And we're going to set it to the value that we set the wiggle to for the magnitude. So let's open our shape layer again. Let's go to the transformation properties, go to the rotation where we added the wiggle. And we can see that the magnitude is 150. That's what we want this to be up here. So scrub that up to 150. Very hard to do with the stylus pen. 151 is as good as I can get. All right, so now we have our slider set up to go from 0 to 150, but it's not working yet. Yes, Liam?
What is the slider?
The slider, okay, it is an expression control. If you go to Effect, Expression Controls, and then there's a pop-out menu, and you choose Slider Control. And that will apply that control to your null object.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, this magic doesn't happen until we link our wiggle effect to the null expression slider. Okay? So basically all we've done right now is just set it up. Let's open up the null effect, slider control, open that up, and it's this part of the slider that you're actually going to drag it to. All right, that's the one that I was dragging to. So here's how you do it. First, you have to highlight the magnitude number. So see how that's highlighted right there? That needs to be highlighted first. And then you're going to link this magnitude of this expression to the slider control for this null object. And you're going to do that by dragging from this little spiral here that's called the pick whip, and you're going to drag that up to the slider. And notice that the JavaScript language has changed now. It's telling you that this is controlled. It has basically an on-off switch or an off-on switch for the wiggle that's controlled by the null layer. So now the note sits there for the most part. The page is moving. But the wiggle for the note now does not begin until the playhead passes over those two keyframes for the slider. So the first slider keyframe, I'm going to move these apart, I'm going to scrub over them. So if I scrub over the first slider keyframe, notice what its value is set at, 0. So that means no wiggle from the beginning of the timeline up to this keyframe. Now when I move this slider to the next keyframe, now look at our magnitude value. It's 151. It's really supposed to be 150, but it's okay. So that is telling us that this slider keeps that wiggle expression under control and still until this keyframe. And then it turns on. And that is the moment when the musical note lifts up off the page. That's when it changes position, it rotates, and it wiggles on the rotation. All right. I'm going to zoom out. We can see a bigger picture of all that. Oh, that was in. All right, so I'm going to go through this again because I have another little element that I need to animate. So we're going to go through these steps again. This is almost. So here's the whole composition. I also have some color changes that go on too with those shapes where they get darker. All right, so how do y'all feel about that so far? Does it make sense to you? Yes, Liam.
So he's done the linking.
The linking?
Yeah, between the slider and.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go through it again. So I have this little element right here that I'm going to animate. Right here. So I'm going to unlock it. Oh, I'm going to go the whole distance with this one. Oh, tapping the wrong thing. All right. So I am moving my playhead. I'm trying to decide where those little notes where that note needs to pop up. And maybe it'll be one that pops up before anything else. So maybe right at the half-second mark. I could even do it at the 1 second mark. I think I will. So the 1 second mark, that's where this little sharp note is going to start to move. All right, so we're going to set its position and rotation first. This is the first thing we're going to do. So to do that, close all those and go to transformation. And we're going to go ahead and set up position, scale, and rotation. And that is right there at that point where it's going to start to move. All right, so that node is going to sit there still in that same spot until these keyframes, and then that's going to be the last place where it stays that way. And then just after that, let's start to move this object. So a real quick, easy way to do this would be to just go ahead and lift it up on, one thing I forgot to do. Darn it, I always forget this step. Let me back up, I'm sorry. I hate it when I do that. It's like such a no-brainer too. Like I should not be forgetting this at this point. Still on keyframes. Okay. Before you animate anything, make sure that you have its anchor point where it needs to be. Because let me show you what's going on. Right now, if I want to rotate this, it's going to rotate around this anchor point in the center. You see that? That's not the way I want to control my object. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to reset the anchor point. Let me go back. Okay. So here's my little object. And I can do this two ways. I can do it by just scrubbing and getting it closer to the anchor point. And this is actually easier for me at the vantage point that I'm at, but if I were zoomed in really close, I would use this tool right here to pick up the anchor point and move it and just place it right in the middle of that shape. And so now that becomes the new rotation point. So now it rotates around its own center, and that's really the way you want to be able to work with it. All right. So before I do anything else, I got to get that little note lined back up over the page where it was at. That's sort of okay. All right. Y'all with me? Everybody with me? Okay. So now that I've got the anchor point where it needs to be, now I can set up my keyframes for position, scale, and rotation. All right. So now I'm going to zoom out quite a bit because I want to see the whole composition window now, so I can really see what I'm doing. So I'll take this down to like 33%, maybe a little bit more. But well, I need more. It's always hard to negotiate, the screen real estate here. Okay, something like that. All right, so I've got my keyframe set up. Our object's in its position where it needs to be. And so I'm going to elevate this, and you can have it fly in whatever direction you want. Maybe this one's going to go over this way. Why not? And it's going to get bigger as we bring it up. And we're going to give it some rotations. All right? Shoot. Not there, though. Darn it. Hang on. Just having one of those days, All right. Bring the position back. All right. Now, set the stopwatch for rotation. So it's all set up where it needs to be. Now, I'm going to move this out, and let's say do I want to go before or after? I think right after these keyframes is when I want it to start to move. And by the 2 second mark, I want it to be, or maybe the 2.5 second mark, I want it to be all the way out of the composition window. So move your playhead to where you want the action of this object to be at that place in the timeline. And now you can reset things like position. So this one's going to fly in another direction. And I'm going to move its position way out here. And you can also pick it up and move it too. You don't have to scrub through these property values. And we'll drag it way out here. Way out like that. Now, right now, we have this moving on a straight line, like a conveyor belt. That's not really the look we're going for. We need this to be a curved line. So we're going to convert the vertices here. Uh-oh, I didn't do that with that tool. We're going to convert the vertices here and here to curved vertices. So we're going to switch tools. We're going to go to the pen tool, and we're going to choose the Convert Vertex tool. Click and drag, okay, and pull your path in the direction you want it to arc in. Same with this vertice. All right, and now let's deselect everything, and let's just see how this thing flies. Where'd it go? That is not working out well at all. It's something really weird. Because that is way over here. Let me take these steps out. I think that's where I screwed up because I accidentally for a second used that tool to select something, and I think that screwed up the behavior of it. So now let's see what we have. Let's move them this way. All right. And I'll get my selection tool and just move this motion path out. And then I'm going to convert these vertices. So I've got a nice arc in my motion path. And now when I drag my playhead, you should be able to see my little musical note. And let me deselect so you don't see the path. And maybe we can see the note actually rotating a little bit. We also want to scale it. So down here at this last keyframe for that note, after it exits the scene, we want to boost its scale up pretty big. And we also want to give it some good rotations. So it looks like it's just tumbling out of the scene. And now let's deselect everything. And it is kind of tumbling. Getting larger. And now we want to add a wiggle to it. So I'm going to add a wiggle to the rotation. And remember, you just right click, at edit expression. Yes, sir. Yes, I do need to leave early. Thank you very much. We will finish this up on Thursday, but I just wanted to go through this step one more time with you guys. So I've added the wiggle. And so now, like a toddler, it can't behave itself. It's going to sit there and bounce around. So we got to add that null layer to give some control to all this. So go to Layer, New, bless you, Null Object, and then we're going to add an effect for expression controls and slider control. And now we're going to find that spot where the keyframes need to go for the slider control values. And so I'm going to find that spot in the timeline where that note begins to take off. About right there. I'm going to set a keyframe, and that's going to set the value for 0. And then right after that, open up my shape. And I'm going to set the wiggle to 150. And then I'm going to select, just don't forget this step, it won't work if you don't do it like this. We're going to assign just the magnitude to the slider through the pick whip. All right? And we do this by making sure that the magnitude is selected. And then on that same layer, go find the pick whip for the expression for rotation. Click and hold and drag that. You see that line stretching up to the slider? And do you see that the slider highlighted when we reach that destination? That's where you let go of the mouse. Now look at our code. So we have some newly written Java language that basically says we have a wiggle expression applied to this layer, and its behavior is being controlled by a slider on a separate null object. We just linked those two together. And so now that little note's going to sit there nice and steady until it's time to take off. All right? So we're going to still continue with this on Thursday and wrap up on Thursday. So we're going to go through these steps a couple more times because I feel like we need practice with it. And then we're going to also work with the type tool and create a path that we can orient the type to. So we're going to make words flow into this scene the same way the notes are kind of flowing out of the scene. All right? Yeah. And then we're going to add, in the last composition, we're going to do the pan and scale technique so that we can either start far out and zoom in, or I like to start zoomed in really tight and then scale out and bring the position to where it needs to be. But that creates this sense of depth, as if we were actually in that space with a camera, moving, into that space or out of that space. And so that's all done with just, some tricks with scale and position and things like that. So I'll get this video uploaded for you guys later today. You can go through the steps again. So we covered once again how to use masks to make a compound shape. And then we explored once again the process of moving these shapes and then assigning behaviors to them so that they don't look robotic or like they're just being moved on a conveyor belt. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed today's demonstration, and I'll see you guys some tomorrow and definitely all of you on Thursday.